Hi, my name is Jake, and I am a bookish drummer. Alright, so today's video is going to be the third episode in my Stephen King ranking video series, where I take a look at everything Stephen King has written and I rank them in terms of my enjoyment. And if you're new to the series, don't worry, I'll link the previous episodes down below. In this episode, I will be talking about the books that I've ranked 50 through 41. In the two previous episodes, all of the King books that I mentioned there were either books that I hated, I really didn't like, that I thought that were mediocre, or books that I somewhat enjoyed, but I had major issues with. In this video, however, we're going to be talking about some books that I actually do pretty much enjoy. They're not anywhere near my favorites, but I still think they're good. Anyway, enough of the preamble, let's jump right into it. Starting off the video with number 50, we have Mr. Mercedes. This is the first book in the Bill Hodges trilogy, and it's essentially King's take on kind of like the murder mystery detective genre. It starts out with a pretty disturbing scene where this person basically just takes this Mercedes and runs over a huge crowd of people, and then it jumps in time a little bit, and you get the character of Bill Hodges, who's a recently retired police officer. And Bill gets a note from the Mr. Mercedes killer. And in that note, he basically says, "I'm the one who did it. I loved doing it, and you'll never find out who I am." And that's basically the inciting incident in the book. It's actually a rare King book where I'm actually not a huge fan of the characters in this book. Rather, I much prefer the plot, and that's what propelled me through the book. Usually if I read a King book and I don't like the characters, that's not a good sign. But the plot was good enough where I wanted to keep reading it and reading it. And while the book was pretty good when I first read it, it doesn't really have a huge rereadability factor for me. Like, I don't really plan on rereading this anytime soon. And also, like I said, the characters weren't too great either. So I think the number 50 spot suits this book well. And number 49 on the list is The Running Man, which is one of his Richard Bachman books. I had a very similar experience with this book as I did Mr. Mercedes. The characters in this book aren't great, but the plot and all the stuff that happens in it is what propelled me forward. It's basically a dystopian novel where this guy gets selected to be on a game show. The game show's a little twisted though. He has to survive 30 days, a full month, without being killed by these group of people that are out to kill him. And if he wins, which no one has done in the past, he will win $1 billion. So it's a pretty cool premise, and it's got some interesting stuff going on throughout the book. The problem is the characters, and even the main character, aren't very compelling. The reason why the book is as high as it is and why it's not a lot lower, like I said, is because the plot is pretty good, and it actually has one of my all-time favorite King endings. I love, like, the last chapter of this book. It's so good. So yeah, we got The Running Man at number 49. And number 48, we have our very first Dark Tower entry. And this is by far my least favorite Dark Tower book, and that would be The Wolves of the Kala, Book 5. It's a little difficult to go over my problems with this book without going too much into spoilers, but I'll try my best. My main issue with the book is that a large chunk of this book is dedicated to going over a character's backstory, and that whole chunk of the book I just wasn't a huge fan of. And also, the whole book is basically just a build-up to this big battle, and when the battle actually happens, it's very short and it's very anticlimactic. So for that reason, it's definitely my least favorite Dark Tower book, and it is number 48 on the list. But also, let me mention quickly that even though I wasn't a huge fan of this book, the reason why it's a little higher than some of these other books is for rereadability, because I know I'm going to be rereading The Dark Tower a lot in my life, and obviously I will be rereading this book, so it's definitely a book that I'm going to read a lot later on in life. And number 47 on the list, we have Joyland. It's about a college student in the 70s who basically takes a summer off and he goes to work at a carnival. And a lot of the book is him just kind of dealing with carnival life. And then eventually you get to the point where he finds out something dark and sinister. And that's when the book becomes a little bit more interesting. There's not really too much negatives when it comes to this book. The plot was pretty interesting. The main character was pretty good. The side characters were pretty good. But overall, this book, I've read this book twice, and both times it didn't really leave a big lasting impression on me. But there's certainly nothing wrong with the book. It's just, it's not one of my favorites. So that's why it's a little lower on the list. And number 46 on the list, we have yet another Richard Bachman book, and that would be The Regulators. This is the companion novel to another one of King's books called Desperation. It essentially has the same characters in each book, but something slightly different happens in each of the book plot-wise. And for a lot of King fans, if you like this book, you're not a huge fan of this book, and the same vice versa. I like this book a lot more than this book. This book was on one of my previous videos. I feel like with a lot of King books, he has sort of an underlying theme or message for the book. But for this book, I think it's just King writing a batshit crazy story where just craziness happens. It's just madness ensues. And overall, it's just a really fun book. I've read this book twice, and it's pretty fun. The main thing is that, the characters, there's a lot of them. A lot of them are very forgettable, and, a lot of them die. But when they do die, you don't really feel anything. You're just kind of like, holy crap. So yeah, it's basically just, a fun little book, and it's number 46. And number 45 on the list is a short story collection called Everything's Eventual. I for sure like this short story collection much more than the other two I had on my previous videos. This one is still a bit of a mixed bag though. You've got some really standout stories like 1408, the title story, Everything's Eventual, Autopsy Room 4, The Little Sisters of Illyria, Lucky Quarter, but you also have a bunch of short stories in here that are ultimately forgettable. So as far as his short story collections go, it's not his worst, definitely not, but it's also definitely nowhere near his best. So for that reason, number 45, Everything's Eventual. And for number 44, we have yet another Dark Tower book, and that would be The Wind Through the Keyhole, aka book 4.5. Again, there's nothing wrong with this book. It's pretty good. I would just say that it's a little forgettable, especially for a Dark Tower book, and especially for just the Dark Tower in general. I wouldn't say it's necessarily very important to the overall story. It takes place between books 4 and 5, and it's basically just a story within a story within a story. You can definitely read the Dark Tower series without reading this book. This book was written, I think, 8 years after book 7. So it's not, like I said, it's not necessary to read. But for what it is, it's pretty good. But definitely nowhere near the best Dark Tower book. No way. So yeah, number 44, The Wind Through the Keyhole. And for number 43, I feel like I'm going to make a lot of King fans mad because a lot of people do not like this book, but I really do. And that would be The Colorado Kid. This whole little book, and it's basically like a little novella, is just about this old cold case crime that this girl and these two older men are basically talking about. And they're basically just talking about how no one has ever been able to figure it out. And if you go into the book thinking or hoping that you're going to get the answer to the cold case crime, you're going to be very disappointed. But for me, the whole book in general is just about the whole mystery aspect in general and how we never really get all the answers. And I thought this book just did a brilliant job of just diving deep into that aspect of human psyche where we really want to know the answers to everything. But even when we find out the answer, it doesn't necessarily mean that it's true. Or better yet, if we really want to believe something and we really think that it's true, it does not mean that it has to be or that it must be. So I completely understand why people get frustrated with this book. But for me, I really like it. So, number 43 is The Colorado Kid. Oh, shit. So again, let's all take a collective breath. And for number 42 on my list, it's it. And I cannot emphasize this enough. I really can't. I do like this book. It's a good book. It's not bad. It's good. But it's not great for me. And I 100% completely understand why this is a lot of people's all-time favorite King book. I understand. But, and that's a big but, I personally have a lot of issues with it, including its length and its pacing. That's the main issue. But also, I'm just not a huge fan of the ending, all of the weird turtle shit, and the child orgy. That part just is not good. Of course, it goes without saying that it has some of the best characters that King has ever written, by far. And even though I don't think the pacing is great, most of the scenes, probably like 95% of the scenes, are there for a reason, and it makes sense. Just for me, I feel like most of the chapters could have been heavily edited. And also, another thing worth mentioning is that when I went into this book, I was expecting it to be very scary because many people say it's his scariest book. I didn't really think it was that scary, to be honest. There were definitely some scenes that were creepy, but nothing that, like, scared the crap out of me. So even though this book is low on my list, and for a lot of people, extremely and unforgivably low, I still like the book. I'd give it 3.5 stars. It's just not a perfect book. It's nowhere near 5 stars. And I don't think I would ever put this book anywhere near my top 10 or my top 20, to be honest. But for me, it falls at number 42. And then for number 41, I feel like this will definitely be unpopular. I'll probably make people mad, probably not as mad as it. But for number 41, I have The Green Mile. Now, I kind of have a weird take on this book. For this book, I absolutely love this book. It's a 4.5 star read for me. So you think it would behoove me to put it higher on the list, maybe even in my top 20 somewhere. But the main reason why it's as low as it is because if I want to enjoy this story, I would just go and watch the movie. Because if anyone's seen the movie and read the book, they would know that the movie is basically a pitch perfect adaptation. Like, it's so good and so faithful to the story that you can basically just watch the movie and get the exact same story without having to read the book. So even though it's one of the best books King has ever written, it's got a great story with great characters, it's very well written and very well paced. It's just not a book that I'll be picking up anytime soon, and I won't be rereading it too often because I can just go watch the movie. So to end the video, at number 41, we have The Green Mile. Okay, so that concludes the third episode in my Stephen King ranking video series. So, what did you guys think of this video? I thought it was pretty fucking stupid. Stephen King? You're gonna put it in The Green Mile, not even in your top 20 or top 10? Are you fucking stupid? You're not a true constant reader. Everyone's entitled to their opinion, Steve. Go fuck yourself. Well, hopefully you guys are a lot nicer than Stephen King was, but feel free to leave all the hate comments in the world, especially for it, because I know a lot of people love this book, and I do like it, remember, it's just not my favorite. But besides that, did I mention any of your favorite King books? Did I mention any of your least favorite King books? Let me know down in the comments below. And next week, I'll have episode 4 available, and that'll be my rankings for 40 through 31. And then that's where we really start getting into the nitty-gritty, where it's really hard for me to rank these books because at that point, they're all like 4-star books, essentially. 4, 4.5. And then eventually, my favorites. And as always, if you liked the video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching and have a great day. Go fuck yourself.